during the presentation to ask any questions you need. And of course, you can always leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Next. God, I love that, Scott, that shawl. Wow. Minutes. We sent out the link for the secretary's report on May 3rd, so you've had a time to review the minutes. If anybody has any corrections or additions, you should unmute yourself now and mention them. And if not, then we will accept the minutes as presented. And next slide. And the treasurer's report, and our dues are starting to roll in. As you know, you all know we've begun collecting dues in April, and so our numbers are starting to rise, which is a good thing. We actually made it through the year to the point where we have income coming in again. So that's kind of a big deal at this benchmark. If there are no questions or comments on the treasurer's report, it can be accepted and filed for audit. And next slide. All right. As we just mentioned, we're working on our dues collection. Dues are still only $25. And we have the new streamlined process we started last year for membership renewal, which means you don't need to fill out a form unless your contact information has changed. You can pay by PayPal. There's a lovely buy now button on our website under membership. And you can also pay by check made out to ECNG, mailed to me. And if your contact information has changed, you will also find a form for that on the same membership page on our website. So next slide, please. Don't forget our member-to-member marketplace as a resource to buy, sell, trade, give away, or solicit items. Thanks to the wooden spools I've received from a number of our members who use the marketplace, there are 3 embroidered spools in the online auction that's coming up. And our 50th anniversary celebration survey, it is coming out. The steering committee for the 50th anniversary celebration consists of Catherine Flowers, Adele Forte, Betty Hastings, Kristen Hunter, Alice Jordan, and myself. And before the committee goes forward with planning an event, we want to hear from you, our members, what you would like to do to celebrate such a unique and important milestone in ECNG's history. And this, the celebration will be in 2023. And we have a questionnaire of only 10 questions, which will go out this month, giving you all a link to the survey. And for those of you who do not have internet access, a form will be mailed to you. And I would ask that you spend a little time with answering these 10 questions so that we can get, first of all, what you want, what your feelings are, and second of all, ask you to be as creative as possible with your ideas and your suggestions. And then we'll let you know the results of the survey and what we plan to do after that. Next slide, please. All right. We are going to have a Magazines on the Green day, and we have a huge donation of magazines that we will be giving away. First come, first serve. And there will also be about 24 books available. Now, I've seen a lot of the magazines, and there are some beautiful, beautiful quilting magazines. There are needlepoint magazines that are gorgeous that I didn't even know existed. So there's really a lot of very good magazines. There's everything for quilting, crocheting, knitting, needlepoint. And I'm sure there's even more that I can't remember, but there's a lot of magazines and a lot of variety. So this is going to be an outdoor event held next Wednesday, May 12th, with a rain date of Thursday. And it will be held at Glenna's home, Glenna Etheridge home on 6 Newman Road in Newbury from 10 to 2. Now, across the street from Glenna's house, there is a town common, and you are welcome to bring a friend, a chair, a picnic lunch, your knitting project, whatever you want, and sit and enjoy some time on the common with those of us who show up. So it should be a fun day if we can get everybody to turn out, and
Say something, Michelle?
hopefully good weather.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say something. We're going to set up some tables with the magazines in the back of the house. There's a terrace on the back of the house. So when you get to the house, you can get to the terrace from either side, of the house. Just go around, walk around the back, and you'll see the terrace. So just so you know, you won't see anything out front, but it gives us a little more privacy. So we don't have the neighbors stopping and wondering what the heck's going on.
Thank you, Glenna. Thank you for hosting us too.
No problem.
All right, next slide, please. All right, the nominating committee, Betsy Black, Chair, Joanne Barber, Marianne Bradley, Brenda Jazowski, and Michelle Maurice, very quickly managed to put together our nominations. And we're going to vote on these today. But before we get to the vote, let me mention a couple of other changes to the board. Our current Vice President, Maureen DeRocher, has resigned from the board effective in June. Our bylaws require that the president appoint someone to fill out the remaining year of her term. And I have appointed Catherine Flowers to the position. So Catherine, thank you for stepping up. That leaves Catherine's position, her remaining year as program chair, open. And I have appointed Barb Harold to fill that position. And so thank you, Barb. Now, our current slate of officers are running for 2-year terms. And it consists of Adele Forte for secretary, Glenna Etheridge for treasurer, programs is Norma Lucy, Ways and Means is Joanne Barber, and communications is Kristen Hunter. So right now we're going to vote whether or not to ratify the board's vote on this. And would someone make a motion on voting to accept on the slate that is presented?
I so vote.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. All right. I'm only going to ask, because we're doing this on Zoom, I'm only going to ask if there are any no votes. So if you're not in favor of the slate of officers presented, please unmute yourself now and say so. All right. Since I don't hear any no's, let alone a majority of no's, the motion to accept the slate of officers has passed. And that's wonderful, because now we can plan our next year. All right. I'm just going to say at this point that while we've talked about financial support for the Guild, we haven't talked about supporting the Guild through participation. Without participation, the Guild would change and probably be a lot less than it is today. less interesting, less vibrant, less able to provide content appropriate for all its members. So I would ask all of you to begin thinking about what you could do to serve the Guild and whether you would consider serving on the board during this year, so that when we get to next year's nominating process, you've thought about it, and if you can do it, you would step up to consider being added as a member of the board. Or if you are able to help the board members, please let them know. And so that's two different ways that you could volunteer and help serve the Guild. And it's really important that the Guild get the support we need, because we are such a large Guild right now. And it really helps if we can have active participation and not have always the same people doing all the work. So I ask you to remember that and think about it for next year's nominations process. And of course, I want to thank our nominating committee and Betsy, who chaired it, Joanne, Marianne, Brenda, and Michelle. Thank you very much. And thank you to Adele Forte and Glenna Etheridge for staying on for an extra term. Thank you to Betsy Black, Ildy Terry, Val, Maggie, Marcella, also for staying on with the board. And thank you to Joanne Barber and Catherine Flowers, who are staying on but in new positions. Thank you to the newcomers for stepping up and joining this board, Norma, Kristen, and Barb. Also leaving the board are Sandra Goldbear, Maureen DeRocha, and Michelle Maurice. And I want to thank all of you three for everything you've done for this board and for the Guild. And to all of you, thank you all for volunteering and giving your time, wisdom, and experience to serving the Guild. Thank you very much. All right, ways and means. You are getting a sneak peek at some of the items that are already in the auction. And the auction is going to begin on Wednesday, May 26th, not the 25th, which is what we originally planned, and you may have heard that date, but it's been changed to the 26th. There's still time to donate an item. You can send information about that item to the Ways and Means chairs at ecngwaysandmeans@gmail.com, or directly to Michelle Maurice or Valerie DeBlois by May 15th. Information about your item should include photos, description including measurements, optional starting bid, optional retail value, and any relevant details about the item. If the item sells, the donor will be responsible for contacting the winner and arranging delivery. It's the virtual world. I don't know how else to better, more efficiently handle that. Contact information for the members are in the ECNG yearbook. If you've lost your yearbook, you can always call anybody on the board to find to get the contact information. Winners will be announced at the June 2nd Zoom meeting. We will be using the Bidding Owl site at www.biddingowl.com, and we'll be sending out some instructions on how to create a bidding account on that site and a link to our auction before the start of the auction. And here you can see, this is our little site on the Bidding Owl site. And you can see here some of our items already listed. And this is what it will look like when you set up your bidder's account. And this is where you will come to submit your bids.
Okay.
So we're creating it still. It's still a work in progress. This is where you would log in for the bidders. And this is the information you would enter. Now, notice at the bottom, if you want to receive either an email notification when somebody outbids you, or a text messages when somebody outbids you, or both, you've got to check those off. Other than that, it's pretty simple information about your name, your address, and phone numbers and email. So, and I guess you can send a text message when you set that up. So that's what it's going to look like. And it kind of looks exciting, doesn't it?
Yes.
We're going to have a lot of fun in the June meeting. All right. Let's see. We're back to this. Name tag challenge. Yes. The board has, well, first of all, we received 37 name tag submissions. And the board has narrowed the choices down to not 10 finalists, but 11 finalists. We had a 4-way tie and decided we couldn't just arbitrarily drop one off. So we have 11 name tags for you to choose from. You're going to receive a link in an email for voting instructions. One link will be to the numbered photos you'll see today, and one link will link to the voting site. Winners will be announced at the June meeting, and we have first and second prizes for our winners. And in June, we will show a slideshow of all the name tags submitted in our June meeting. And that will be the voting ballot. And here, this is the ballot where you will vote for 2 top selections. And that's what it looks like. It's very simple. And so the photographs are numbered and named the same way they are in the ballot. So you'll get, like I said, you'll get 2 things, the numbered photos and then the numbered ballot. And that will be out this week after the meeting. And some of them are just lovely. And you're going to see them now, I believe. Here we are. So number 1 is from Michelle Maurice, and number 2 is Wendy Beaumont. And they're all so different. Number 3 is Anna Gallo. So you see how this matches the names and numbers on the ballot. Number 4 is Maggie Judd. Number 5 is Adele Forte. Number 6 is Sandra Goldbear. I'm sorry, Sandra, we seem to misspell that all the time. Number 7 is Marjorie Tolaco with her beautiful little chickadee. Number 8 is Glenna Etheridge and charming little embroidered flowers. Next one. Oh, that one's mine, number 9. It's actually in a little tiny hoop that I'm going to wear on a little ribbon. And number 10 is Betty Hastings, and I love that teapot. And one more is Terumi Shinsato, and that's interesting. I think I voted for the other one, but I want them both. All right, name tag challenge is done. Just remember that you're going to be getting an email, and so don't forget to look for that and vote. And I hope you enjoy it. All right, we are up to our presentation, I believe, from Kathy Graves on modern quilting. And
Okay.
you're ready? Good.
I'm going to do the introduction. Kathy, are you online?
I am. I'm here.
Okay. Today we have Kathy Graves, and she grew up sewing various projects with her mom, as many of us did. And she took her first quilt class in high school, but in the late 80s, her mother shared a book with her. It's Okay If I Sit on My Quilt, which then introduced her the joy and speed of rotary cutting, which we all really appreciate. She became a prolific quilt maker and often made 2 quilt tops a week. Later, she began exploring modern quilting using techniques which included improvisation and adapting traditional quilt patterns to make them more modern. She also uses curved piecing, paper piecing, unique rulers, and long arm quilting techniques. I've taken a class from Kathy on the quick curve ruler, doing the wedding ring quilt. I still haven't finished it, but it's on the list for this year. And she's a lot of fun, and I'm happy to introduce her. Kathy?
Hi, thanks, Catherine. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody from your guild and Kristen who helped me figure out the technology, how you guys do it. So I have 2 slideshows for you. One is about modern quilting, and then one I sort of did a virtual trunk show, since I can't really hold up quilts very well or have you guys see them. So, and Kristen's going to be watching questions, and I'll take questions at the end. And she's going to monitor the chat. And I do have like sometimes I ask questions when I normally talk, and I know it's hard to answer kind of because you're all muted, but that, you know, you guys are good at adapting. I think we all are. So today we're going to talk about what makes a quilt a modern quilt. And there's kind of different categories or topics that we're going to talk about. Minimalism is one. You're going to have to go, yes, thanks. Negative space is another. Improv is the third one. Asymmetry and the use of bold colors and graphics. And the last one is modern traditional, where we take traditional patterns and blocks and make them more modern. So next, please. Oh, and we're going to talk about alternative grid structures. So it's going to be fun. And the one thing about modern quilts is a lot of times they use multiple different kind of techniques in a quilt. And some of the techniques kind of go together more than others. So it's kind of a fun thing. And by understanding kind of what the different things are, it helps you see in a modern quilt, you know, what makes it modern. And it's just a fun thing to understand. All righty, next, please. So negative space is what you might consider background fabric in your quilt. And negative space in a modern quilt often is much bigger. But often it can be used in sashing or borders or background, but it adds a part to composition, and it also helps your eye move. So if there's places where, you know, there's not much going on and the big pieces jump out, that's part of the way they use the negative space, and your eye gets to rest there. So next slide, please. There we go. Minimalism is similar to negative space, and they often go together, the minimalism and the negative space. Because minimalism means that there's not as, you know, it's not a quilt with 12 rows of blocks by 12 with a lot of action going on. Often it's, you know, basic shapes, squares, circles, triangles, rectangles. And by isolating the design relative to the size of the quilt, it pops out those designs. A large section of background fabric, and it sort of goes along with the 20th century modernist movement in art and other sort of forms of art and, you know, creativity things. So, okay, next slide, please. I love this quilt. This quilt, you know, shows really what I see as minimalism and negative space. You know, it's basically, you know, 3 circles and, you know, a little interesting thing in the corner. There's a lot of negative space. There's a lot of minimalism, but it's very striking, the color choice and how it's quilted. I hope you guys can see the quilting, but it's really a gorgeous quilt. And Okay, thank you. So this one is made by Rebecca Bryan, who actually made, I saw this at QuiltCon, which is, QuiltCon is like Paducah or the show in Houston for modern quilting, and they have it once a year. And this is one, I think I saw this one, I went a couple times. I think this one was in the one in Pasadena, California, but I just love this quilt. I mean, it's a simple quilt with like, you know, gray, cream, red, and yellow, but and each of the triangles is kind of unique, and the background quilting is really beautiful. And she did write a book about this concept. This was one of the books, I mean, one of the quilts in the book, but the book has other triangle quilts that are really quite lovely, and I picked up the book. It's a fun thing to make. Okay, next quilt, next slide, please. Okay, so I just took a little closer picture so you can see how she did linear, similar shapes in the long arming quilting, and I think it's really beautiful. So next, please. All right, here's another one Melissa Everett made, and it's basically, if you think about it, it's 4 blocks, right? And they're simple, but they're stunning. And this is one where they play with the color. By having colors overlap, it can make, like, it makes your eye think that there's, you know, they're overlapping, and if you put paint on top of each other, that would be what the color is when you mix it. And it's a very striking kind of quilt. Bill Kerr and Weeks Ringel wrote a book about this, and about this kind of technique and how to do it, and also how to figure out what fabrics work, because it's, your eye has to believe that the two, you know, fabrics overlapping would make that color. And so it's a really, I think it's a really fun technique to do. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the golden ratio, or the rule of thirds, which is really common in architecture and actually in biology, it's like why when you plant flowers or bushes, you don't plant 2 or 4, you do 3. And if you look at the columns in Rome, they are, you know, not centered, they're a little off. And the rule of the thirds, or golden ratio, it brings movement to the quilt. It usually can be vertically or horizontally. This one, I picked this quilt because I think it shows it diagonally, which is something we don't see that much. But in my quilting, I often use this, you know, ratio and concept. You know, if I have to do a back for a quilt and I don't have enough fabric, you know, and I'm going to use 2 different fabrics, instead of putting the piece like on the left and the right side, I might put it down a third from the edge. And, you know, to me, that's just more pleasing to my eye. So next, please. All right. I love this quilt. It has the minimalism, negative space, but the golden ratio concept as well. So I think it's really stunning. You know, I'm a big Patriots fan, not as much since the people left Tom Brady, but Angela Kennedy made this, and she is a Broncos fan. So it's not as, but it's kind of fun. I just like the movement and how she quilted the movement into it too. So I think it's a pretty amazing quilt. Simple, beautiful. All right, next quilt, please. Next slide, sorry. Improv. Improv is a big part of modern quilting. And a lot of people, when they hear the word improv, they get nervous, like just do whatever I want. But it's not really that way all the time. So basically, improv, you break traditional rules of quilting. Sometimes the quilt grows without a pattern or a firm plan. But sometimes when they make a quilt using improv, they have a rough idea or guidelines that they want to adapt as the quilt progresses. So they may say, you know, they could do it like just kind of random of everything, or they can say, I'm going to only do these 2 things and I'm doing them random. And I'll show you some pictures to kind of show the difference. And again, this is something modern quilters often do with minimalism and negative space. And it's, I really enjoy doing improv. Next, please. All right, so this is crazy. This Deborah Jalbert made this beautiful quilt. It's just, you know, a background fabric and then various shades of orange. And, you know, it's a simple concept, but, you know, it's very intriguing to look at, I think, just because of the unique way that you use different size orange pieces and how that, you know, looks to your eye. And so this would be an improv quilt that she made with a plan. And so I think it's beautiful. The other thing about improv quilts, a lot of times, like there sometimes isn't like a lot of blocks. There can be a minimal amount, but oftentimes for me, they take longer than like following directions and doing 9 patches or, you know, star patterns, because you have to think, you know. So I don't know if you guys have design walls. I do. I use it all the time. I have a big flannel part of the wall in my basement in my studio. And a lot of times on improv quilts, I'll put pieces up and play with them. You know, sometimes they'll be up there for 6 or 8 months. Sometimes they come down and go back up, just because it's sort of like a creative part of me that comes out when it does. I can't like say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And I sometimes think that improv, you have to be in the mood to do it. You can't sort of force it. So next slide, please. Oh, I love this quilt that Katie Peterson made. It's, you know, it's improv with negative space, minimalism, and the golden rule. I like how you can see that the left side of black, you know, is smaller than the gray side right, but it's just beautiful. And the fabric she used as the sort of gray is textured and gives some depth to it. And it's really just a simple sort of improv, sort of like a log cabin, but the pieces sometimes were, you know, pieced before they were added. If you like look in the upper right hand corner, how it's sort of like different. So I think it's kind of a fun quilt. Next, please. So this is an improv quilt that I teach in a class that unfortunately classes aren't going much right now. But so this is sort of like a piano key kind of quilt where you can see that they're in blocks, but the lines go not, you know, perpendicular. They go at various angles. So this is a fun quilt to make if you want to try improv, and it uses 5-inch charm squares. So you can buy, you know, 2 different colorways, blue and purple, and put it together and give your hand. And you also can chain piece it. So that's a pretty cool thing to do for an improv. It's sort of, I think it's really empowering to say, and it's not a big, huge project that takes a long time. So next, please. Oh, I love this quilt. You know, you guys get together in real life when there's no COVID, and you have a guild and you are all creative and you share your creativity and ideas and get encouragements for each other, which is a wonderful thing. Guilds are. You know, some of the younger members of quilters don't go to real life guilds. You guys might know that by the ages of your youngest members. A lot of them do it online. And so this is a group that's called Beach Social, and it's an Instagram group, and it's from people around North America. And they have a challenge to themselves, and they're sort of like their own guild. They say, we're going to do linear things, or we're going to, whatever it is. And one person gets to direct that month's concept, and everybody bakes a block and then sends it to that person. This one here was entered in QuiltCon, and it won best group quilt. And I just think it's really beautiful because they had a color palette. They're supposed to be like urban buildings, but each person did their unique way. And so it's really fun to, if you make that Be Social into a hashtag on Instagram, you can follow them, and they do really incredible things, but it's mostly improv, and we can, I don't know, learn a lot from them. But they're an example of what Instagram is to, I mean, mostly younger people, but it's not all. The other thing I really like to use Instagram is if you have a new quilt project you want to do, a new pattern that you picked up, and you like the front cover or you don't, you say, what would happen if I made the light dark and the dark light? You know, would I like that? Some of us are really good at envisioning that, but others of us are not. And so if you go to Instagram and put the hashtag and the name of the pattern, oftentimes you'll see 100 or 300 or 500 pictures of that quilt made. And you can see how different placements of color and fabric kind of can affect what the quilt looks like. And so I find Instagram a great way to preview concepts in quilts and color choices in quilts and fabric choices. So, you know, and it used to be Facebook was really big for quilting, and it still is, but most of the modern people have moved to Instagram, but not all. But so it's a fun thing to I like to look at the quilts and see, wow, I really like this, or I don't like it this way. And I think it helps me hone my ideas for an upcoming quilt. So you should try that if you haven't. Next slide, please. Okay, so modern quilters often use bold colors and graphics. You know, a lot of modern quilters use solid colors like, you know, Kona cotton or whatever solids. And as there's been more growth in the modern quilt movement, more and more fabric manufacturers are making solid lines of fabric. And I heard the statistic once, Kona from Kaufman was kind of not very big number wise and sort of wasn't doing very well. And when the modern quilters became more prevalent, their line of, you know, solid color fabrics, you know, has, I think, quadrupled. So, and, you know, the nice thing too is usually solid fabrics are cheaper. And so that's a nice thing. So using the high contrast fabrics, oftentimes they don't use primary colors. And modern quilters often will build this into other techniques. So oftentimes, if I look at a quilt, there's typical modern quilt colors. Now they always don't do that, but in general there are. And in the next slide, we'll kind of explain what that is. Okay, there we go. They use mostly tertiary colors. So if you see the color wheel, they don't use primary colors or secondary colors. They use tertiary colors, which are the colors between a secondary color and a primary color. So that's sort of that yellowish green, this bluish green, the orangey red, the yellowy orange. And so when I see those colors, you know, like orange is really popular in modern quilting. And I don't know that orange is really popular in traditional quilting so much, but you know, that's a color palette that modern quilters use a lot. So, but it's not extensive. I mean, it's not complete. That's what I mean. It's not every single one. So it's just an kind of what tends to be popular colors. All right, next slide, please. So Krista Watson, she made this, and I just love it. It's 3 colors, you know, cream, black, and red. It's a very simple, bold geographic with, you know, triangles, diamonds, and it's gorgeous. She's from Las Vegas, and she teaches classes at different shows. If you can ever take a class with her, I really recommend it. She has written books and is quite talented. So next slide, please. Here's just a close-up of how she did the quilting. She is a big using her domestic machine quilter, not longer, I mean it. And so she's, you know, I think that's gorgeous and beautiful. And that's one of the areas she focuses on in her books is how to quilt on a domestic machine. Okay, next slide, please. All right, I don't know if you guys have seen this before. This was made by a woman from Tasmania, Australia, and it is a diamond, you know, like and it's gorgeous. This quilt is like 92 by 92, and it's all paper pieced, you know, her own design with solids, and it is stunning. When I saw it in person, you know, it is beautiful when you step back and you can see it. It's it just was a showstopper. And this woman that made this quilt, she sold it for not very much money, I think, for winning Best in Show in a big show. And she had not planned to come to the show because it was that one was in Savannah, and the organization Modern Quilt Guild brought her over, and it's a big deal to win Best in Show, and it's just a gorgeous quilt. I really love it. It's been in a lot of magazines, so I don't know if you guys seen it in magazines, but it's gorgeous. Next, please. So the other thing modern quilters do, and some modern quilters, this is what they do. This is their jam. This is what they do all the time, is they take a traditional block and kind of make it modern traditional. They change it somehow. So they could make a mild change, a major change. This is more recognizable to all quilters. And, one of the things that will make it more modern is the fabric choice and the color palette. And how we talked about kind of those basic colors modern quilters tend to go to, they use that in here as well. And, modern quilters, of course, mix this with other techniques as well. Next slide, please. I love this. This is Mary Davis. This is like a 9-patch quilt. And you can see in the upper left-hand corner, the 9 patches are a certain size. And as they go to the bottom right-hand corner, the 9 patches change, and it's dramatic with the colors, but it's simple, concept and piecing, but it's gorgeous because of the changing size and the ratios of the height and vertical of the 9 patches. But I just think it's really quite stunning. I love that quilt. Next slide, please. Here's one, Kristen. Actually, Christy Dahm made it. I had the wrong name on it. It's just a simple quilt with, a familiar block. And I believe this was her way of coping with the 2016 election. And, it was her, using her feelings and putting it into her art. But again, like the other one that was a 9-patch where the sizes change, this is a different block where the sizes changed and the ratio of the height and width changed. But it's really, again, really striking and clever. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Where are we? I think we're at slide 25. Is that right? There we go. Okay. Here is another block that's using bold colors and simple designs, but it's, has sort of a checkerboard block and then linear blocks. And I love how the bottom right-hand corner is sort of black and cream. It's subtle gray and the same blocks, but just, I just think it's a gorgeous quilt. All right, next. Excuse me. So this is somebody from my Modern Quilt Guild. Her name is Betsy, and she's an RN, and she's a great person. And so what she did is she took 6 blocks that she made and combined them with background fabric of solids and put the stripes in and framed them. But it's a great way to do modern traditionalism. For somebody who wants to make a quilt fast for somebody younger than you, this is a great way to do it because, making 6 blocks is way faster than making 36 blocks or 48 blocks or how many ever blocks you made. But it's just really a stunning layout of, just different. And I think it's really beautiful. Betsy's family is all really tall, so she has to make really long quilts. So it's nice. All right, next quilt, next plate. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. Modern quilters use alternative grid, and it allows them to have flexibility in how they put their quilt together. If you think about a traditional quilt that you make in blocks, it's a grid. You have vertical and horizontal, and it doesn't allow the flexibility you want. And there is some tricks I'm going to show you in a little bit of how using alternative grid, you can assemble non-traditional quilts where, the block sizes are different and so on. So we'll dive into this a bit now. Next slide, please. This is one, Kristen, where you're gonna have to do different things. Clicking, yeah, there you go. Thank you. So this is like a traditional set, you know, it's rows and columns. It's easy to recognize because it's sort of a grid or a graph shape. So this is the same quilt that is on, I mean, same concept, but it's on point. So you can see it a little bit different. So next, please. So you could add sashing to make it, you know, jazz it up, or you can do sashing with cornerstones. Okay, next, please. And so what we're going to do is talk about how we can make those modern blocks and squares or rectangles and put them together easily, where sometimes you can't see the structure or the grid in putting the quilt together. So next, please. All right, so I call this is my own made up word concept, traditional, not concept, but like naming it, traditional setting modernized. I don't think it's bad grammar too. So it's just taking a block, and it can be traditional, and then leaving some, you know, blank. And so this just is, you know, a simple kind of cross improv block, but there are those that have, you know, no cross in them. So it's kind of that traditional setting modernized is what I call it. So next, please. All right, so this is another quilt. This is a quick curve ruler quilt that I think it was it Catherine said she took one, the Metro Rings. This is by the same company, So Kind of Wonderful. They have a ruler, and they have about 100 patterns that go with a ruler, and it has this gentle curve. So this is you know, traditional setting, but modernized because it slips up and down, and because they're sort of ovals with the ends lopped off. You know, you look at it and go, it's different. It's like, I don't know. I really love this quilt. I've made it. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a quilt that's called variable framing. And if you look at it, you can see there's 4 columns and 5 rows. And so in a way, it's a 4x5 quilt, but geez, all the blocks are different sizes. You know, so how does that get done? And so what it is, if you made blocks like that, which are improv, if you took your design wall and took like blue painter's tape and put it on the wall and put the block where you wanted within that square, like let's say the square is going to be 16 inches square, you put your block in where you want it, and then you just frame it to get it to the 16 by 16 size. So that's what, so the framing on the, like the top one on the left is different than the framing in the second one on the left because of the size, but in the end, the block will be the same size, like 16-inch squares. And so then it's easy to sew it together. And by having this variable framing, it makes the blocks look like they float. And you go, huh, how did they put that together? So this is a quilt Jackie Gehring did. She's a really famous modern quilter who lives, I think she lives in Kansas City now. She's moved a couple times, but she's about my age. So a lot of the modern quilters are younger, but she's my age and she's terrific and she's really inspiring. Yeah, she's great. And I was fortunate enough to hear her talk twice. So these are from that. So let's see the next slide, please. Oh, so this is, I talked about this, constructed as blocks. Return again, please. I'm sorry. Doing this way probably isn't great when I have somebody else run, you know, do the, but I appreciate it. She's doing a great job. So it, like I said, it makes it float, and it, you know, the negative background just kind of makes it interesting. All right, next slide, please. Oh, painter's tape, shared that with you. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this again is a variable framing quilt, but you can see the quilt, the block within the inside of those blocks is sort of a cabin, log cabin quilt. And then she did, you know, a cream sashing and then a blue sashing, and then, you know, put it in whichever color she was going to do. So this one you can really see the grid because she made them, all those blocks, the 9 blocks, the same size, but they were rectangles. And so it is just another way of doing variable framing. Next slide, please. All right. So if you see here, there's there's the mustard colored, which is the background, and then there's grays and black and whites. And what they did is put the background fabric. So if you look at the top of that, it's hard to point, but you know, the top mustard piece between the two grays is the same as the background fabric. So if you put that block, which is sort of a rectangle, onto the background fabric, you don't see it as a block. You just see the gray and black floating. And so this is a way, when you use you make the background fabric flow into the block, it makes it so you know, it makes it really look different. I think it's a pretty fun way to do things, of making it, you know, the alternative grid. All right, next please. All right, so here's a bigger picture of that quilt. So when you look at it, you don't see its blocks unless you look really carefully. It just looks like the pieces of the gray and black and white are just floating there. So I think it's a very clever way to put it together. Okay, next slide. All right, here's another one that does the inflow of the background fabric. This is Jackie Gehring's, it's a quilt that's she used to live in Chicago, and she would fly into Midway where, you know, all the streets and houses are sort of in a really structured grid view, but sometimes people had gardens. So this is her take of, you know, flying into Midway Airport. Next slide, please. All right, so here's another one. You see, this is just a 4-block quilt, but the blocks have improv in them, and a lot of that negative space flows into the blocks. Now, if you look at the quilting closely, it sort of goes up and down. Jackie Gehring has 2 books out called Walk and Walk 2, and she uses her walking foot of, I think she has a Bernina. You know, a lot of times when you get a sewing machine, you have, I don't know, 500 or 5,000 stitches, and you probably only use 20, maybe 10. So what she's done is she's learned to play with those stitches she has on her machine, and she'll change the length and the width and play with it until it's really a beautiful quilt. When she first started quilting, she had long armers do it for her. And then she found this way that she could do it herself and add her own, you know, creativity into her quilts. And it's pretty wonderful. So if you are interested in learning how to do more quilting and different type of quilting with your domestic machine, I would consider looking at that book called Walk by Jackie Gehring, and, you know, seeing if that sparks you or is something that you want to do. But I think it really adds to this quilt. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a magic number concept. And if you think about it, this is a way to combine blocks of different sizes into one quilt and not have to do partial seams most of the time. So if you see, like, you could have a quilt's blocks be 2 inches finished squared, 4 or 8, or 3, 6, and 12. And having, when you do different size blocks, if you do magic number, it makes it a lot easier. Next slide, please. Okay, you're gonna have to hit the return. Okay, so this is a quilt that I saw online. I loved it, and they used the magic number. And if you hit the return again, this will be mine. And I did not use the magic number. So for mine, it was much harder to construct. And if you look at their quilt, you can see a grid, you know, going all the way from top to bottom. You know, they've combined different size blocks into one, but it's still, you know, 4 blocks wide and 5 blocks long. Mine, if you take like the bottom seam and sort of in the middle and go straight, you can see it bumps into blocks. And so I did it the non-magic way, which was much more challenging to do. But this is the one on the right there is one of my very favorite quilts. I teach that class, and I made a smaller one as well. And I did make it the magic wonder way, the magic number way, because it's easier. So next slide, please. It comes down there. Okay. So paneling is another way that you can take odd size blocks and sew them together without doing partial seams. So if you see across the top, there's 3 different sections. And what happens is they sew each section together until then they can be sewn together. So you can see they take the 3 and they sew 2 vertical lines, and then now they have a bigger block. So the paneling is a way to take weird size blocks and make them so you can sew them together. All right, next slide. All right, so this is a quilt, that has paneling. So, if you look at it, you'll go, geez, how do I put that together? But that's how they did. They took the blocks, made them bigger, and then sewed them together. Excuse me. I love this quilt. This quilt has a lot of negative space in it. And, it's really a 9 blocks. A little bit of the background fabric is in each of the blocks. And it's just, it's asymmetric. And there's lots of negative space. Plus, I think it's really beautifully quilted. So it's a quilt that kind of has a lot of those modern quilt kind of techniques in it. So next slide, please. All right. So this is where I usually ask questions, but because you're all on mute, I don't know how to do this. But so I don't know if you want to put in the chat what techniques you think this has that is modern quilting. Is that going to work? Anybody? I don't even, here, I'm going to open the chat, see if I can see it. All right. Okay. Anybody want to make a guess? What techniques are in this?
I would say there's asymmetrics and
Yes.
solid colors.
Yep. That's good. Yep, that's true. Anybody else? Thanks, Dawn. I think that was you.
There's some traditional.
Yep. Yep.
A
It also,
lot of negative space.
Yeah.
A lot of negative space.
it does have a lot of negative space. I see the golden rule of the 1/3, 2/3, because if you look on the left and the right, they're not equal. So you guys been listening. Good job, even in this hard kind of Zoomish way. But all right, we have another one to show. Okay. So which techniques do you think that this Christy Schroeder used on this quilt?
Well, there's the rule of 3.
Yeah. Do you
That
solid
last
colors?
technique that you showed.
Using the background to help it float
Uh-huh.
into the blocks.
Yep.
And changing the orientation of the blocks.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
The bold colors and bold graphics.
Yes.
And the shading, or is that what you just said? Dark to light.
Right. Exactly. And Anna. Yep.
I don't know if I would say that was a lot of negative space, but it lacks borders. So it
Right.
brings my eye into the middle.
Yeah.
and
A
rather
lot,
than out.
right. A lot of modern quilts will put that background fabric around, but they don't do the skinny border that traditional quilts often do.
Right.
So,
right.
so it floats more. So
I
this is
like that.
all solid colors. And this woman, Christy Schroeder's from Texas, and she, like, this is a pattern you can buy. I saw it at the quilt show and I loved it. And then I saw you could buy it. And I've actually made one for my soon-to-be daughter-in-law. She's really good with color, but this is a really fun quilt to make. And she'll make the same quilt like in 3 or 4 sizes, and you don't make more blocks to make the bigger. The blocks get bigger. So it keeps the same ratio of, how it looks. So you can make a king size or a wall hanging, and it still has, the 6 same ratio. But she's very talented. She's in Texas, and it's a great way to try modern quilt. The other thing she does is she puts the colors, the names of the colors, and she'll do it like 3 different ways. So some people have a hard time saying, how do I do the gradient right? Even if you don't use her gradients, it's a tool to help you do it better yourself, or it can help you. So she's pretty good. So, all right, next slide.
If I could add this piece, you all probably know about it, but there's a show on PBS or Create called Quilting Arts. and it's all the modern quilts. And I've seen a few of those techniques on that show. It's very interesting.
Sounds good. I've never seen it. What's it called? I'm gonna write it down.
Quilting Arts.
Quilting Arts.
And it's on PBS?
Well, it's a PBS station. It's called Create. On Comcast, I think it's $9.59.
All right, I'll have to check it out.
It's a woman who's quite famous in the quilting arts field called Susan Brubaker Knapp with a K.
Okay. Wow, thanks for sharing that. I'll have to look at it, check it out. Yep. All right, so we're just gonna do a little summary, and then maybe we can take a few questions after the summary, and then I'll go into my virtual trunk show. So this is just kind of a summary of, the different techniques we use. We use the alternative grid to try to create, put together quilts that otherwise would be very difficult to assemble. You take a traditional setting and maybe change one thing to make it modern traditionalism. Try minimalism. Minimalism is a great way to make a quilt out of orphan blocks, or if you have a little bit of time, you can make 6 blocks and do, puts together in a unique setting so it's faster. A lot of people use that for charity quilts sometimes. Try and use solids or non-primary colors. Have the background fabrics float into the blocks so that the blocks look like they're floating. So,
Kathy, when it comes to quilting in a large negative space, do they downplay the quilting, or is that a space where they would upplay it?
That's a very good question. A lot of times it can be either way. A lot of times people who love to do the quilting will have the quilting shine in the negative space because you can see it. But sometimes, people it depends where you want your eye to go.
Right.
But usually you can see the quilting more on solid fabrics or, so a lot of people do that. And a lot of people will make quilts with a lot of negative space because they want to show off their quilting. When you think about it, we make a quilt for a certain reason. And some people make it because they like the pattern, but other people will make it because they like the pattern so they can do the negative space quilting. And, it's as unique as all of you guys are. You all like different things. So
if they do heavy quilting in a negative space, does that make the space less negative? I know that sounds like a crazy question.
I understand what you're saying. It depends like what color thread they use. Sometimes if you use a blending thread, the quilting pops, but not the thread. And it just adds another layer to the quilt, to texture. And it's I have to think about that because I think it's a good point.
So
because
either way, it all works together though, whichever you decide to use.
Absolutely. So, part of, I think, modern quilting is to say, break free of kind of the traditional rules and do whatever you want. And, just explore your creativity. And that's what I like. I like to do that. I have like creativeness inside of me that needs to come out, and I do it some way or another. Sometimes I quilt, sometimes I knit, but quilting for me is easier to be more creative with the fabrics and things like that. Knitting, I'm not creative as much. I mean, I do enjoy it, but I don't say, hey, I'm going to try this and this and put it together. That isn't, I either don't know how to do it, or, that's just not the way I do creative. To me, knitting is soothing more. And I don't know if that makes sense. You guys might understand that too, but.
Yeah, well, I related to cooking or baking. Someone made this recipe, so I follow it the first time, letter for letter. After that, then I play with it. If I do it a second time, that's when I'm going to start to explore.
I want to see.
Yeah, Maureen, did you have a question or a thought? Okay. All right, let's move along. I think there's only 2 more Well, skip this one. I should have taken the slide out. Okay, so we talked about me. So, you know, I do long arm professionally. I do all kinds of quilts. Next, I teach classes. I do workshops. I do them at guilds. I do them at stores too. You know, that's sort of not been happening right now for the last year. Yeah, it's kind of been a weird time, as you all know. And next, I think there's one more maybe. You know, and I do have some classes that I teach that are easy improv modern quilt projects that a lot of people have liked to take. All right. So does anybody have any questions? You can.
Do you have your contact information available?
I do, but I don't know how to exactly give it to you.
Okay.
I hate to say that.
e-blast. We'll put it in the e-blast following with the voting instructions.
Oh,
Okay.
super. Thanks, Dawn. I don't know how to get business cards out on a Zoom meeting.
Right.
It's good. Anybody else have any questions? All right. So we're gonna move over to my personal quilts. Kind of, are we doing good on time? All right. So we could just, I gotta kind of go through these fast. And you know, if you guys want to ask a question when we're there, that's fine. Because this is just sort of my own personal work and it's not as educational. It's more see what I've done. All right, let's get going on this one. So this is my quilt journey. I taught in Africa, in Kenya 2 years ago, and I couldn't bring my quilts. So I put together this and I can share it with you. So this is that same quilt, but I made it doing the magic number. So it's easier to put together. It's not actually the same quilt, it's the same concept. And so I've taught this in classes. And I've had students make it out of prints and all sorts of batiks. It's very cool. And I love the quilting personally on this. It's like a fancy clamshell and I really like it. I like to play with it. And I quilted it in hot pink. And I like hot pink. So, all right, next please. So this is a herringbone quilt that is improv. If you look on the lines on each side, you'll see that there's a seam in the middle there's two colors and it's curved and it was really fun to do. So it was one of those controlled improv. You know, I knew what I was doing and how big the blocks had to be. This is out of a book from Victoria Finley Wolf, and I took a class in her studio in New York City. And I really love this quilt. It's, you know, I used brown. I don't really like brown, but the brown really went with the quilt and it was just really, really fun to make. So, and it's really kind of, I think it's unique and fun. So next, please. Okay, this is kind of hard to see, but this started with half square triangles of black Kona and 3 prints. One of them, if you look in the center, there's a little eyeball. One of them was sort of like a modern silhouette of a woman. And one of them is like print alphabet, like from, you know, back in the newspaper days with funny, you know, more formal kind of letters. And what I did is I made like 30 half square triangles. And then I put them up on my wall and I cut parts off and put in more black. And I think this was at the time when my parents had died and I was sort of in a bad mood and sort of depressed a bit. And so it sat on my wall in the winter and I just couldn't figure out how to get it together, or it didn't seem right to me. So I remember it was the beginning of spring. I put the yellow dots in there and I was like, oh, this is it. And I just finished it that day. So,
Wow.
and I quilted it. I don't know if you can see because it's black, just horizontal lines that are very in depth. And I use wool batting, so it's kind of puffy a little bit. But it's one of my favorite quilts and it's just kind of weird, but I love it. So, all right, next quilt, please. This is probably my second favorite quilt. Our guild, our Modern Guild in Rhode Island. I don't know if you guys do exchanges where you bring blocks and you exchange with other people. And so you bring 16 and you go home with 16 different ones. We did this and these were half square triangles. So I took half square triangles of the print or the colors and I sewed them together and I cut them apart and I did improv. And then I decided to make them that size. and I just took 2 different solids and sewed it together. And then I quilted a circle on the solid fabrics, the busy or colorful ones. And then I did like a tin ceiling quilting in the back of the gray. And honestly, this is one of my very favorite quilts because it was kind of simple, but it like just was fun to do. And I used that golden ratio thing that we talked about. So it's 1/3, 2/3 approximately. And this quilt I faced instead of putting binding on because I didn't want the binding. Like I just kind of wanted the quilt to go to the edges. You know, if I put a binding on, or the other thing I might do is do binding the same color as the background and change the color when I get to the different gray. So, but you know, it's pretty funny because we all made quilts out of our half square triangles that we used. And these are my half square triangles because they don't really look like half square triangles, but that was part of the fun. So, all right, next, please. All right, this is another class that I took with Victoria Finley Wolf. And if you can see, the shapes of the blocks are like bricks. And so this was one where you could chain piece and you could do faster, but it's, you know, it's kind of eclectic. And the background fabric is a K facet fabric. And it's, you know, I don't know. It's a fun quilt. It's kind of wacky a little bit, but I really enjoyed making it because it was an improv project that had rules, but you could chain piece, which I like to do when you can. And a lot of times you can't do that when you are doing something improv. You make one block, one seam, put it on the wall. So sometimes I just like to have fabric go under my needle because it makes it, I think it's soothing. And so this was a fun combination of creativity and, you know, a little bit faster. So, all right, next slide, please. All right, this is that quilt I talked about that's uses 5-inch charm pack, 2 different colorways. And, you know, again, this is chain piece, but it's fun to do in a modern way and improv because the angles and stitches are different. You make the blocks bigger and square them up. So the next one, please. So this is the same quilt. I just did it a little bit different. I made it a different shape. We have this crazy house. It was built in the 90s, but it was a copy of a New Hampshire farmhouse. So we have 3 fireplaces on the main floor, one in the kitchen, one in the family room, one in the living room. And so I make quilts that are long and skinny, and I put them above our fireplace. And so this is one of the ones I made. So it's kind of a strange shape, but it's for I use it as art. And so I like it. So, okay, so this is a fun quilt. This is a quilt that's a 9-patch, 3x3. And I started with some fat quarters that I won. These are not really my favorite quilt color palette. And my friend and I, who's a quilter, I was at her house and we said, I was spending the weekend and I said, let's do something fun. So we made these quilts literally in, I don't know, we quilted them, we made the tops and quilted them like in 4 hours or 5 hours. And we, each of the squares we cut, you know, you put a bunch of the fabric on top of each other and cut, and, you know, it's improv and it's fast. And it's crazy because her background color, like I use gray, her background color was beach umbrellas. So mine looks really modern and hers looks really traditional because of the color choices. And so I wish I had a picture of hers because she gave it away, but it's funny how the same pattern, same techniques, just different fabric choices makes a huge difference in how it looks. So, all right, next slide, please. So I love this quilt. I made this for my husband. We have 5 kids and he has an office now that my kids are growing up. He has an office in one of the bedrooms, but keep the bed in there so when somebody comes, they can stay in it. And so these are just improv log cabin blocks, very small that I laid them into, you know, these stripe pattern. And I really love this quilt. It was so fun to make. And it was a really simple technique. If you see between the blocks, there's light and dark gray. You know, what I did is strip pieced a bigger piece, you know, taller piece. And then I cut it the size I wanted. And then I could just move the seam up and down to get it where I liked it. And so it was just a very easy way to do it that I love that it looks cool, and I like it on the bed. So
That's very third dimensional.
yeah, well, look at, I put a Baptist fan quilting pattern on it on the dark, and like that's a mix of the modern and the and traditional. Yeah, and it's like a lot of us struggle with making quilts for men. I mean, boys are easier, I think, but men are hard. They don't want flowers, and it's hard. And so I wanted a kind of a masculine quilt. So
Great, great.
I like it. The only thing I did, I'll admit it to you guys, is I quilted it upside down. So I should have, if you look at the gray goes, the darker gray goes on the bottom, and I quilted the quilt upside down. So the Baptist fans are going the wrong direction.
Oh.
And
Right.
yeah, I know, but like I don't take myself that seriously. So I just, I loved it. And I got a lot of this fabric from Fabric Place Basement. They're a great place to get stuff because they have a lot of different kinds of fabrics and textures of, what colors, but they have them sorted by color. So that helps when you want to, like that grays are like green gray, and it's hard to find that. So I like that store. All right.
So Kathy, if you were to turn that upside down, would it still have the same 3D effect?
Oh, yeah. This is the right side up, but I
Right.
quilted it upside down. So
Right.
where you see the Baptist fans, the circles, the smooth half circle kind of is at the bottom. It should have gone up. So that part should have been upside down, like 180-degree turned. But it would look the same. Just, I mean,
But you'd still have the 3D effect. To me, it looks like cards or photos on a shelf.
wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
So if it were turned upside, turned the other way, with the white as the bottom and those little blocks sitting on the white, with the gray being the background, would it still have that same depth?
I think so, because it's just, I think it would, and this is one of like the fun things to quilt this, to pick the texture to give the difference in the two color grays, because that adds to, like how you asked about negative space and what you do in the negative space. Like, to me, this is that, it's, you can see it, but it's not so bold that it overtakes the squares, right? So it's sort of like that happy medium. But if I had quilted it something unremarkable, I don't think it would look as good, in my opinion. I think this delineates the two different color grays, if that makes sense. But
that quilt is very mesmerizing.
Thank you. It was really fun to make. I have a pillow that I made for it that isn't done. That like 5 years. So I should probably finish that. All right, next quilt, please. Okay. Ooh, I love this. So how when you get a big print that you just love and you don't know what to do, because if you cut it up, you can't see how great it is. So this is an Aboriginal print. And actually, this was really fast to do. I think this was in a Modern Quilt magazine, kind of, and I changed it a little bit, but it's just squares of fabric with different sorts of sashing, fat and thin, and some not. And I did it at a quilt retreat really quickly, and I just really love the quilt. It's funky, I think. I don't know. I love that fabric, and I wanted to do the fabric justice. I didn't want little pieces of the fabric because the fabric's so wonderful. So, and the fabric matches my living room, the Aboriginal stuff. So, all right, next slide, please. So, I told you I had 5 kids. So my mom used to make quilts for my kids when they went to college, and my mom passed away. And so my next 3 kids, I made the quilts or they helped me. And so my middle daughter, who's child number 4, she's an engineer at Mass General now. She wanted this quilt, and so we made it together. And so this was a paper pieced quilt, and we used a certain, color palette. And it was really fun to do with her. Her name's Shasha, and she likes to do quilting. So we did it together, and it was more, I enjoy it more when I, do something with somebody else. And so it was an extra long twin. You know how when you go to college, you get those extra long beds. So you have to make quilts longer if you want them to get their feet covered. So, so this is the front, and the next slide is the back. So we used extra fabric that we had to stretch the background fabric, because the background fabric, I don't know if we had enough, but it just makes the back interesting. And not to say, yeah. So, and she was going to college and we hadn't finished it. So my friend that I spent the weekend and we went up to her house, we were there, and like 4 of us did the binding all at the same time. Like everybody started in a different place. All went around the quilt. And my daughter who did this, she's left-handed, so that kind of screwed it up a little bit because she went a different way than we. But we got it way done faster than I would have myself, and she got to bring it to college, so it was perfect. So yeah. Next slide, please. Oh, I love this quilt. I'm a big fan of Keith Fassett. I was fortunate enough to go to a class that he had. So this is just a color play with his fabrics. And this was hanging in Franklin Mill store for like a year and a half. I forgot it was there, and it doesn't matter. There's a pattern for it, and it's super clever. You make these strips of fabric with different fabrics in it, and you sew it in a circle, and then you cut it in different places, which gives you the color movement. And I also like how the vertical strips are different widths. And so this is a quilt. I did pretty dense quilting, but you only see it on the white, right? Because it's on Cape Fassett fabric. It's so busy, quilting is lost. So, but I do like this quilting. There's another slide of it next, I believe.
That has an Asian look to it.
Yeah, it does. I just like it. The only thing, the white is actually white, and my 5 kids are 22 to 32 on Saturday. They're not really dirty, like they're not like little kids, but I still worry about white. If people at my house, almost everybody uses quilts on their lap if they're sitting TV. It's just kind of the thing we do. So this one is not a quilt on a lap quilt. It's the wall quilt, because we have dogs. The dogs kind of get things a little dirty.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. All right, next one, please. Oh, here's just a close up of the quilting because I like it. All right.
What's the name of the pattern of that K facet?
I don't remember. I can look it up and get it to you guys. It's actually a really fun, fast pattern. The key is to pick out the fabric well so that it gradiates evenly, sort of.
Okay.
I will try to get it to you. I'm leaving town tomorrow morning to visit my son in Shreveport, Louisiana. He's in the military. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to put my finger on it really fast. But if I can, I will send it to, who should I send it to? Kristen or Catherine?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. And one of you can share it. So I love this quilt. This has used a layer cake, 10-inch squares. I love this fabric. This designer of this fabric is from Europe. And I just love her fabric. And it's just really fun. I use a lot of rulers. I have a whole wall of rulers on like pegboard, but like fancy from a store. So it's not really pegboard. But this is just making flying geese. And I have a technique where I make 4 at a time, use this cool ruler. And I just love doing that. And so this is fun. And again, I try to quilt fun things, and I like this pattern. It's sort of like a clamshell, but a different kind than we saw before. The other thing is, if you look at the background fabrics, there's a lot of different fabrics, but there's not just one. This is very common in modern quilting. They use backgrounds like this, and they call them low volume. So there can be prints or whatever, but they're low. You don't really see them, but it adds interest to the back or the background fabric. So when I shop for fabric, I look for low volume fabric because you know, having a bunch makes it more interesting. Like if I use 2, it would probably be annoying to your eye, but having like 10 or 7 just makes it so that it's, you know, there's, the background isn't just the same. It varies and it just adds another dimension to the quilt, I think. So next slide, please. Oh, so this is just a quilting picture. So, okay, so this is something that's really much more traditional. I like the colors. This, my parents had died. This reminds me of them. They love birds. This was their color palette. And it's just a really simple, I love the fabric. I thought it was really fun. So it's just an improv log cabin block, super simple. And just the fabric, I think it's really gorgeous. And it matches a chair I have of my parents, and it just makes me think of them. So you know, it's quick and fun. I liked it. So I think I have yeah. So this is the quilting pattern. I don't know if you can see on the left, there's a little bird. So I did similar to what the bird pattern was on the background fabric. And then I did like sort of like, I'm blanking on the word, like a maze kind of thing on the red.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I tried to make it so it has that different texture we talked about. So it was fun to do. So okay. Oh, I love this quilt. So this is like a coin quilt. I like a lot of my quilts, I guess. A coin quilt. I don't know. Many of you probably have made a coin quilt where you kind of do a stack, but having the orange pieces have different thicknesses, like how tall they are, and have them being offset in different lengths. It just is an interesting take on a coin quilt. And again, this uses that low volume backgrounds. You know, some of these are German letters because that designer is from Germany. And so some of them are like newsprint. It's just fun. And then I just, to get it have horizontal movement, and you can see the kind of circles go up and down. And in between the circle quilting is vertical lines. And so it's just a fun quilt, you know, I like it. It was fun to make too. All right, so this is another one. You know how I said big prints are hard to cut up? So I really like that shoal fabric from K Facet that had fish on it. But again, I didn't want to cut it up, and you know, I wasn't sure I wanted to make, you know, like a shirt out of it. I did make a pillowcase too, but there's this company in Minnesota who has these patterns that highlight a big print. And she has a bunch of different ones, and I really like this. I was going to use the fish in all the blocks, but then it just seemed a little, I don't know, boring. And I had a friend over and she said, well, why didn't you use a different fabric? So that's why in the corners I have that circle-y oval, I don't know, eggy looking fabric. And it just is fun. And, you know, I quilted it with circles, so it kind of looks like bubbles. I mean, it's just a fun quilt. Maple Island Quilting is the woman, and she has, each of her pattern has 2 different size blocks, and she has probably 6 or 7 patterns for big prints. So I highly recommend them, and they're pretty fast to do, and they're fun. I like it. She has good directions. So Maple Island Quilting. So that's just a close-up of the quilting. So, all right. Ooh, I wanted to show you my sewing area. I thought you might like that. So this is where I sew. Those bookshelves in the back are from IKEA, and I got glass doors on them so that they, you know, keep my fabric cleaner or whatever, less exposed. And let's see what the next one is. Oh, I don't know why I put this picture in. It's my daughter, and in the background you see that tree pattern or the tree quilt. It was Christmas time and I didn't have anything to go above that fireplace. That's a dark green fireplace. So I said, I need to make a quilt. So I made that quilt like in 36 hours. So I don't know why that's there. I mean, I do, but because I have a picture of the quilt later. So next one. So this is my son and his fiance, but that's a quilt. So this is kind of how I use quilts. So this is behind our, you know, in our living room. We change it periodically. But that's one of my favorite, using that quick curve ruler I talked about. That's So Kind of Wonderful does. All right, next quilt, please. Yeah, so this is that quilt I made. I show it to you in different color blues. This is like aquas. I asked my future daughter-in-law's mom what color she liked, and so I made that quilt. This was so fun to make. And I actually am making another one just because it's fun. Because it's just, you know, it's like, I don't know, some quilts are, if you follow directions, are really fun. Some are kind of can be annoying, and they're all in between. So this was a fun one. So, and I love the quilting I did on it. This, you know, I think it's fun, like shape and give some texture to it. All right. Oh, this is just the quilting up close. And you can see on the upper left corner, like upside down cats. My daughter-in-law to be Katie loves cats. So I put cat fabric on the back. All right, let's see. Oh, that woman, she also, this is another pattern she made with flying geese. And
Is that Brigitte?
no, I think her
No?
last name is Schroeder.
Okay.
And she has her quilts, she like lives in the desert sort of. And so it's a lot of times it's desert focused. But this was, again, was a super fun quilt to do really fast. But it plays on that color, you know, like the gradation of blues. Because she's just really good at that. And it, you know, it helps me learn to be better at it. Because oftentimes when I go to the store and I pick out solids, you know, the gradation from the first to the second to the third, like sometimes the second and third are too close relative to the difference between the first and the second, because and then it will look a little strange. So I think seeing her choices helps me pick better choices myself. All right, next quilt. We're almost done. Oh, so this is a lovely quilt it's a K facet quilt, and you pieced squares and then made half square triangles out of them. And so I'm a big fan of Tour de France. And so I make a lot of quilts while I watch the tour because sometimes it's boring. And so I usually make a lot of quilts in July because I watch the Tour de France, which is like 21 days of 6 hours of sewing. So I get a lot done. And it's just, I think it's really fun. It's a play of colors. It's simple, but I really like it. Sometimes that hangs in my living room as well. I change them out. Okay, next quilt. All right, this is a quilt our Modern Quilt Guild, you know, when the national show, QuiltCon, it's actually international show, they have a theme and, you know, guilds make one. And this is one we made where we did improv blocks and then made these, they're supposed to be waves of from Rhode Island. It's the ocean state, even though I live in Massachusetts. So that was fun to do. We did it as a guild. All right, next one. Oh, so this is interesting. So, you know, the disappearing 9-patch quilt. This is a disappearing 9-patch quilt with
Wow.
fabrics that I used cream, and then I used a charm pack of this African kind of looking fabric. And what I did is when I cut them, I only rotated the pieces two directions out of 4. And I also, when I did the disappearing 9-patch, I used more of the solid than the print. So I would use 3 or 4 of the print in a 9-patch. And so it just looks vastly different than a traditional 9-patch. I mean, disappearing 9-patch. And my Modern Quilt Guild had a show at this armory that this organization asked us to be in. And actually this quilt won best in the show. I mean, it was judged by interior decorators and museum curators. So it isn't like technically the best quilt, but aesthetically they liked it. So I was kind of surprised. You know how women are, oh, it didn't deserve it. I felt that for a long time. And I'm like, dang, well, I've come to conclude if they like it, then, and that's what I care about. No, I don't, that's great. You know, it's not about technically being the best and whatever, over quilting. It's just, and then I quilted it. I don't know if you can see it. It really matches the fabric. So I think it like went together well. All right, let's see if the next one. Oh, this is just a quilting up close. And I used a old cotton padding, so it shrunk when I washed it. So it's kind of fun. All right, next. All right, so this is just a fun half square triangle quilt that's put together uniquely. So it gives that diagonal look. And it was fun to do. I did it at our summer cabin when I don't bring my whole stash with me. I have a limited amount of things I can bring because it's on an island and you have to take a boat and stuff. So that was a summer quilt. Okay, next, please. Oh, so that's that Christmas tree over the fireplace quilt. So it's just kind of fun. And I did sort of like pine needle quilting on it. And, you know, I mean, it's just so, like, to me, that's typical modern, you know, 7 are the same and one's different, you know, so that's fun. And I did, yeah, this is another one. It's okay. The owl's good. You can move to the next one. Thank you. So this is a, you know, quick curve ruler, again, negative space. It goes above a fireplace sometimes too. And I did like wood with knots in it sort of look. And, you know, I really like it too. All right. This is just up close to see the texture of the quilting. So I used a thicker batting so it puffed up so you could see that. All right, next one, please. Oh, so this is the Metro Rings quilt, which is a take on the double wedding ring quilt, but using the quick curve ruler, which someone took the class of, and it makes it faster. You know, like I think I made this quilt, I believe, and it was less than 15 hours, which is pretty good for a double wedding ring quilt. But it's not, you know, it's like a lap size, but it's really fun. It's funky colors, right? So that's kind of how I am. And the purple squares, I agonized over. I tried like 7 different fabrics before I liked the purple. And I sewed them on and then took them off. It was like, sometimes that just happens. Okay, next one. So this is just another one with a quick curve ruler with fun fabric. And then I just, you know, did a spiral out of it, which it just was super fun. I actually made the quilt. It's actually a table runner we have on our table in the spring. I wanted to try the quilting, so I made the quilt. But that's kind of how I roll sometimes. All right, I think we're, okay, so that's that one that is in my living room right now. And it's just really fun, you know, eclectic. My daughter loved this one, the one that's an engineer at Mass General, and she made it with me. We made a bigger one for a queen size bed that she has. So that's, you know, that's always fun to make it again with your daughter. All righty, next one. Oh, this is a quick curve ruler using black and white and solids, except the center block, if you can see, is a grunge polka dot. So it just adds a little bit of interest. I haven't quilted this because I'm trying to decide if I'm going to make it bigger because I really like it, but I haven't decided. So it's in my quilt top done pile.
Pretty amazing.
I don't know if any of you guys have quilt top done piles, but I do. So next, I think this is the last one. All right. Does anybody have any questions?
Wow.
No, this is Maureen. I just want to apologize for my rude comment earlier. I had unfortunately unmuted and did not realize that I had done that. So to anyone that heard it, I apologize. It was a wonderful presentation, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yep. Thanks.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Wow.
Handsome.
And a learning experience.
Yeah.
A lot of information.
Yeah.
Any questions? I appreciate the positive thoughts.
It's really lovely, all of it. Thank you.
Very good show.
That's very nice.
Really lovely.
All right.
Where do you live?
I live in North Attleboro, which is you know, down by where 95 and 495 intersect, down by Foxborough Stadium.
And
So-
I'm not even a quilter, and I have to say that I've been jumping out of my skin with energy for this program. I just loved it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree with Leslie.
Yes.
Not a quilter, but just gorgeous and very exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Your
Lots of
color
good
choices.
inspiration. We really appreciate
Yes.
that kind of inspiration because I don't quilt very often, very seldom, like once every 10 or 15 years. And I've got fabric from New Zealand when I went to visit my son, but there's no way I'm going to cut it up. So I'm like, oh, so to see your quilts about using large pieces,
Yes.
it was like an eye opener. I can't wait now.
Right.
So thank
Yeah,
you.
because that fabric has a lot of history with you. It's
Oh,
important.
it's like, no, and each of the pieces of fabric I picked has something special about New Zealand. It's the certain trees that we saw, the certain plants, the animals, the birds. And it's kind of like, I don't want to cut them up in little pieces. Help!
I agree.
All you quilters are going to help me out here pretty soon.
That sounds good.
Well, I love Kay Facet's material. I've just finished one of his quilts.
But I'm glad to find someone else who likes him. I just think the materials are fabulous.
They are. I was fortunate. 2019, he came to Connecticut and gave us talk and taught, I think 4 days of classes. I took 2 full day classes with him and his partner Brandon. And he was like, I think he was 82 when I did it. I'm like, I got to do it. He's not going to do it forever. And it was so good. He's so good with playing with color. And the other thing is fabrics. He keeps like the same oranges on the same orange on all his fabric. So you can take things that you bought 10 years ago and put it with today's line and it matches. Where a lot of, if you get fabric from any other company, they come out with a line of 20 fabrics and then another line and another line, and the blue isn't the same, the green isn't the same. And so he is consistent. So it's easier to play with color with his fabric.
And where do you get his fabric?
Sometimes
It's
online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's local places that carry it. Franklin Mills carries it out in Franklin. I think Emma's has some. Quilted Crow has some.
Yeah.
Right.
Fabric Corner in
Him
Arlington.
in Bath, England, when he was doing his knitting and his patterns there. He had a show. So I have all his knitting books before I even realized that he did any quilting. So now I'm into his quilts.
When we saw him, when we were doing the class, like it was like, I don't know, 7 hours, he gave us tasks, told us how to do it. And then as the day went on, we needed less help. He sat in the corner knitting. I think his knitting is real passion. He plays with the color with fabric, but he doesn't sew the quilts, but he's just so good with design and color. And that's his really amazing talent, I think. So
is he the quilter that did, it was part of a show called Red and Teal? Can you do that? It was everyone told him you can't put red and teal together. And he did a whole show of quilts, red and teal, and different texts.
that sounds like
Sure
him.
it's the same person.
I don't know. He is very much
it does.
marches to his own drummer and knows what he likes.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, it was so fun playing with the fabrics he suggested. And a lot of people think he only likes people to do K-facet only quilts. And he was like, no, I like the color and the texture and the shape. And so the quilts, one of the quilts we made, they had a whole section of other fabrics that he thinks plays well with his. A lot of them were like fruit, like he really liked oranges, or like just weird, like almost some of it was novelty fabric, which like I would never think of putting it with Cave, but he just looks at the color and texture and how the piece is going to be. And, he can just see stuff. I can't see that. I can't see that this would highlight that color because I see that it's chocolate chips, cookies or something. He goes, wow, if you take a little thing, it's going to look cool. And yeah. All righty.
Well, that's why I thought of that show, because that was the whole point of just using 2 colors and see how different each quilt could be. And yeah, you could use those colors together. Why not?
Yeah. Yep.
That wasn't going to hold him back.
No.
All right. Kathy, that was just wonderful. I learned a lot, and I'm only a very beginning quilter. So I did learn a lot. It was fascinating. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
That was great.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you. Be creative and try new things. All righty.
All right.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Next up is our raffle for today.
Oh, yes.
Don't forget the raffle. And let's see. This is our raffle. So just to jog your memories. And we have 119 entries today.
Wow.
Wow.
It's a popular bag. All right. Betty Hastings is our winner.
All right, congratulations.
Yay, Betty.
Yay. All right, everybody. We have a lot going on, so I'm just going to remind you quickly that our next meeting will be the annual meeting on Wednesday, June 2nd. We will have the installation of the new officers, announce the auction winners, the name tag winners, and we will have the name tag slideshow. And a sneak preview of our 2021 and 2022 events. So don't forget our daily projects on Facebook. Don't forget you can watch our presentations again. The links are all on our website under the programs tab. And everyone, enjoy your spring. Hope to see you at our magazine day. Don't forget our auction. Just lots and lots going on.
Yeah, it was nice seeing everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Stay safe and stay well, everyone. Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Oh, already,